Ladies and gentlemen, my name is Martin Fischer, and it is a great pleasure for me to welcome you today to the second part of the series Neighbouring Russia, hosted by the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom. In 12 episodes, we want to look at how Russia's neighboring countries reacted to the full-scale attack on Ukraine almost exactly 1 year ago. What political changes occurred in these states in relation to their large neighbor Russia? How was the Russian war of aggression perceived by the citizens? This is what we want to learn from well-known experts. Today we look at the Nordic states, Norway, Denmark, Sweden and Finland. Most of you surely recognize the struggle of Sweden and Finland for becoming NATO members. But did you know that Denmark and Norway were NATO founding members? So it's exciting to see what similarities and differences that reactions of the Nordic countries have. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm very pleased that we were able to recruit Ms. Saari as an expert for this exciting region. She's a leading researcher at the Finnish Institute of International Affairs. She works at FIIA's Finnish Foreign Policy, Northern European Security and NATO program and leads foresight-related research at FIIA. This event will be moderated by my valued colleague Jeroen Dobber. He has been part of the Friedrich-Naumann Foundation for Freedom's Europe office since May 2020. In his role as head of the FNF Security Hub, he follows political developments in the European Union and NATO, with a particular focus on foreign and security policy. Dear Jeroen, I'm very pleased to see you and give you the floor.
Yes, thank you, Martin, and welcome, Sini, also on my behalf, and welcome also to all the other participants that are in this webinar. I will keep my introduction very short because we only have half an hour for the discussion and we have a lot of issues to discuss. So I'll try to keep it as brief as possible. But as Martin mentioned, we would like to talk with you about the way that Russia's war on Ukraine has affected the relations with the Nordic countries, with a focus on Finland, which is the country that you focus on. As also mentioned before, we've all heard about Finland and Sweden's application for NATO membership, and we're also aware of the strong support for Ukraine. But it would be interesting for us to get a better understanding about the background to these developments. So where are you coming from? What is the situation now? And where do you think things are heading in the future? We'll start with that in a minute. But before we start, I would like to say that for the participants, it's also possible to ask questions. You can do that using the Q&A function, which you will find in on the Zoom platform. And we warmly invite all participants to make use of this, and then I will try to bring up as many questions as possible that we can treat in half an hour. So to begin and to get us up to speed, Sini, could you give us a quick kind of overview of Finland's relations with Russia prior to the invasion of Ukraine on the 24th of February last year?
Thank you for the invitation to participate to this event. It is very interesting, and I'm really glad that I can represent my country and perhaps the Nordic countries overall, and tell you a bit more about the changes and continuities indeed that we can see in Finnish foreign policy and perhaps also in the Swedish foreign policy. I think for a very long time it seemed that nothing really changes in Finnish foreign and security policy, and then suddenly last spring it felt that everything happened at once, and I think that we are still somehow on the reflection mode, you know, what happened and how should we analyze that, and what are the factors that really led to these tremendous changes. But I think I will start with the basic fact. So Finland is an EU member state since 1995. We joined together with Sweden, and both Finland and Sweden have been traditionally militarily non-aligned. I think Sweden has really embraced this kind of neutral status for more than 200 years. So it's really, I think for them, it's a kind of really a big part of their kind of foreign policy identity. Whereas in Finland, I think we have a bit more pragmatic approach. During the Soviet years, many know the term Finlandization. Also that we really struggled for our neutrality, and it was constant balancing and managing the relationship with the Soviet Union so that we could integrate into the kind of Western economic structures and so on. So it has been more challenging for us to maintain that kind of independent, neutral position. But we haven't really considered ourselves as a neutral state since we joined the EU. And the term that we always used to use is militarily non-aligned. And we consider ourselves very strongly with the Western camp and Western state and society. And that is kind of the basic starting point for everything. But now we have been very happy with the status of being militarily non-aligned. There hasn't been any kind of public desire to change that status. And I think I think January 2022, our Prime Minister was commenting that indeed during her term in office, there won't be any changes to this status, and NATO membership is not anything that she or her government will consider. But then everything changed really quickly after Russian renewed war of aggression in Ukraine that started in 24th of February 2002. But that is the background, I think. And also perhaps something that I would like to tell about the Finnish foreign policy then is that I think that we have been one of those countries that has always highlighted the importance of having dialogue with Russia, and also the importance of confidence building and kind of easing tensions between great powers. So, ever since 1975 and the CSCE Helsinki conference, that has been really a big part of the foreign policy identity that we have. And I think that has continued even after 2014. Our president was one of very frequent kind of visitors in Moscow and really wanted to keep the dialogue going despite all the difficulties.
Yeah. So a much more pragmatic relationship as opposed to the more idealistic relationship that Sweden or the idealistic position that Sweden had. Yeah.
Yes, but also I wouldn't describe that we have never had this kind of hawkish approach that perhaps the Baltic state might have. So it has been a bit different, but hopefully I can also explain what changed. So looking forward to your perhaps next question.
No, that would exactly be my next question. So what were those big changes that happened in Finland in the debate following Russia's invasion of Ukraine, and perhaps also what hasn't changed? Are there any things that have not changed as a result of that?
Yeah, excellent. Like I said, we are still analyzing what exactly changed and what did not. But I think at least my take is that we still have that pragmatic approach. And this is something that we call small state realism, that, you know, small states can't really afford to be very idealistic, and they have to be super realistic. And this was really for us, I think, the renewed war of aggression in Ukraine is really a moment of truth. And what changed was that we realized that our former strategy of trying to, because the idea prior to the war was that if the great power tensions kind of ease, and there will be also more room to maneuver for small states like Finland, and that will then reflect positively on our security and the whole Baltic Sea region, for example. But now this equation changed completely, because Russia clearly showed that it does not respect a sovereignty of smaller neighboring states. And Ukraine isn't even a small state, it's a big state. So you can, of course, see that definitely kind of woke up the frontline state sensibility in Finland. And since as a small state, state survival is always somehow in the background, and that can never be forgotten, I think what really changed was our analysis how security can be achieved in our kind of Nordic region, but I think overall in Europe. So that changed. And we understood that in order to have sustainable peace in Europe, we need to have collective deterrence, and that failing, we need to have collective defense. And of course, this is the reason why we then in May applied for the NATO membership. So in a way, it is a logical next step. And you have to also remember that we have cooperated very closely with NATO. We have taken care of our own national defense forces really well. There is general conscription in Finland that's basically something like 90% of Finnish men sign up for every year. So, you know, you have never, I mean, when you have 1,345 kilometers of common border with unpredictable giant like Russia, you never can afford to forget questions of national security, and that we never have. And we have the policy in Finland prior to February last year was really to get as close to NATO as you can without being a member. But now, this is now the kind of logical next step in this current security situation that we are dealing with in Europe. So in a way, I would say that this is still, it was sudden, it was perhaps somewhat surprising, but I would still see that this is more an evolution rather than revolution. And this just reflects the kind of very pragmatic approach that we have. But I think in Sweden, perhaps this is slightly different, because Sweden is further from Russia. They don't have common border with Russia. There is always, you know, Finland before Sweden. So we are, so they geographical location is different, but also I think that they don't have that frontline state sensibility that we do. And for them, of course, there was much longer historical background of being a neutral country and successfully staying out of conflicts in Europe. So that is a very unique position in Europe. So I think for them, it might have been, national identity, that might have been a bigger kind of jump or leap than for us. But I think they also understand that it makes sense to go together. It doesn't make any sense to, for the whole region, the Nordic region, because now all Nordic and Baltic countries will be within NATO structures after Finland and Sweden are accepted as members. So of course that makes sense, I think, defense-wise and for regional cooperation-wise.
Yeah, and I think in Sweden the logic was also often that the logic for not applying for NATO membership was that Finland wasn't doing it, and that we would always kind of stick together.
Yeah.
But then after the change happened in Finland, then that argument was not a valid argument anymore.
It is interesting also because we always thought that Sweden would go there first and we would need to then decide whether we want to go along. And now in the end, in May, it happened I think that Finland was more in a hurry than Sweden. So the dynamic was eventually quite different than what we presumed.
Yeah, exactly. That it's interesting how the tables have kind of turned in that sense, and how Finland has been leading that process. And I also thought what you mentioned with Finland, that it's quite kind of the level of preparedness is quite high. I think there's also the realization with a lot of other NATO member states that Finland has a lot to add to the alliance. In terms of capabilities, but also experience, and there's a very high level of civic preparedness that I think a lot of countries are more and more interested in as well. All in all, that would be a very positive development if that were to happen finally. In the meantime, we have one question that came in already, and I see some further ones coming up. The first question is about this kind of alliance neutrality, if that is still in the current geopolitical situation, if that is still the right way to go. What, from your point of view, I mean, Finland has been going on a track towards aligning more now with NATO, also heavily invested in EU defense integration. In the current geopolitical situation, that's a necessity in your point of view?
I'm not quite sure that I understood the question, to be honest, but perhaps,
Yeah. So do you have to kind of, I think, just to summarize it or phrase it differently, is it necessary in the current geopolitical landscape to get aligned, to show your colors, to align yourself with others?
Well, this is our analysis for sure. And I think it's not just what NATO can do for us, but it's also what we can do for NATO. And I think this is the time when we have to realize that we won't have sustainable peace in Europe before there is credible deterrence that will stop Russia. So I think Finns have, what is interesting about the situation in Finland is that there is a very strong consensus on what is going on and what needs to be done. And this might be somewhat different in Germany, but I think when you have such a long border with Russia, that kind of sobers up your thinking processes pretty quickly. So there is a sense that if now there is an off-ramp for Putin, or there is a kind of hastily negotiated solution, that won't bring peace in Europe, because the war will only continue. Russia will interpret that as a goal, that it can do this and it can continue, and it can kind of continue pushing the borders little by little, and that is kind of invitation to continue. Whereas the only way to stop that is by credible deterrence. We need to stop Russia from doing what it has been doing since 2008. So this is and I think this is very clear in Ukraine, where people really understand what is at stake. And I think it is very clear also in Finland that this is what needs to be done. So we better kind of get our act together and really now support very strongly Ukraine, so that there will be a solution to this war that will, and then we will integrate Ukraine to the kind of European structures one way or the other. And also we will build that deterrence, credible deterrence collectively against Russia. Yeah. Otherwise, we will see war, suffering, death in Europe for a very long time, and that is a horrible future.
Yeah. But thank you very much for that. In the meantime, there's another question that came in. This is about the position of Germany and the possible support that Germany could provide to the Nordic countries in case of an attack. I will kind of rephrase it a bit. So about the expectations of Germany's role there. Do you think is there concern in the Nordic countries that Germany might be willing to support in case of militarily in case of an attack, but not able to? And do you think that has changed over the past year?
So we are talking about a situation, for example, where Russia would attack, I don't know, Finland or...
Is Germany able to step in those cases, or is that a concern in the Nordic countries that Germany is not able to?
In Finland, I think that the starting point for us has been for, decades and decades prior and also right now, because, we are not members of NATO. I mean, we will defend our territory. And this is exactly why we have maintained and developed our defense forces, that we can protect and defend our own territory. So I don't think that there is a sense that this will radically change. Of course, it will change in a way that then there will be common defense planning. But I think there is this kind of ownership that we will defend our own territory, even as NATO members. And then, that will be done in a way that it will be planned, of course, and trained with allies, but the main responsibility remains with us. And I think there is very strong public support for this kind of thinking. So I think in this respect, our situation is somewhat different from the Baltic states, where probably there is more need for kind of outside support.
That's clear. Is there the position of Germany in all of this? How is that viewed in Finland? Is there in the public perception? Is Germany doing enough, or do people expect Germany to play a bigger role?
Well, usually Germany has been traditionally one of those countries that Finland has, like within the EU, kind of identified the most, in a way that perhaps vis-a-vis Russia, that there has always been a sense that Germany knows Russia, and that we are on the same page with the need to have dialogue and have a kind of good understanding what is going on in Russia and what is Russian thinking on things. But I have to say that perhaps now with this, this war and this crisis, I think that has perhaps changed somewhat. That there is a sense that although our policies might have looked the same, perhaps the underlying logic hasn't been quite the same.
Yeah.
Because we have always had this, like I have now highlighted many times already, this frontline state sensibility, that there has always been concern for our national security, and that has never been forgotten.
Yeah.
And also when it comes to our energy policy, I think that, yes, we traded with Russia and also believed in, like we had no problems with trading with Russia. And I think also, of course, having good relationship with Russia also benefited us economically. And we definitely don't want to have a closed border. But this is how it is now, and we are fine with that, because national security always comes first.
Yeah.
And I think there was a higher degree of preparedness in Finland, so that we didn't rely on Russian gas exclusively, but there was always kind of multiple sources. And yes, there was plan A that might have relied on Russia, but there was always plan B as well, and plan C. So there was a preparedness plan always, and constantly updated and never forgotten. Whereas I think now perhaps this war has revealed that perhaps Germany didn't really have such a realistic take on Russia after all, and it probably puts too many eggs on the same basket. So I have to admit that now I think there is a bit more criticism towards German foreign and security policy in Finland than has traditionally been the case.
Yeah, I think that you hear that more often, that the security component hasn't been that important in the German approach to it. So that I think that's an interesting analysis, that maybe the approach that you had was similar, but the underlying reasoning was quite different. Thanks for that. We're almost running out of time. As a last question, we still have a few minutes, so I still wanted to bring it up, is where do you see things are heading in the future? What are like kind of longer term trends? So where is the Finnish position heading? And also when Finland and Sweden are admitted to NATO, how will that change things?
I think for the Nordic region, it changes things a lot. And I think kind of the Baltic Sea region will look different after that. And in a way, interesting fact is that although Russia always told that they will retaliate if Finland ever applies for NATO membership, and they will react to that. But now there has been this kind of like very stable situation around the Baltic Sea. Nothing compared to the situation after 2014, when we actually did see this kind of military maneuvering around the sea. So now it has been very stable and quiet, and we really haven't seen much reactions from Russia. Of course, it is because now it's focused on Ukraine, and I think many of the bases near the Baltic Sea have been, well, not emptied, but there are much less soldiers there and much less heavy weaponry there, because they are now in Ukraine. So there is, of course, that, and we will see probably some kind of maneuvering afterwards, but that remains to be seen. But I think what also changes is that there is now the situation is more clear cut. There is no room for speculations. You know, is this gray zone? What is it? But now, after we will become NATO members, the map is very clear. So it is the Nordics and the Baltics that are within NATO alliance, and Russia can't test that anymore.
Yeah.
So in a way, it clarifies the situation, makes things more clear cut, and I think that might actually reflect positively on the stability, because usually Russia tries to abuse situations where there is some question marks or things are not clear. But when so at least so far, I think NATO has been a very good deterrent, and Russia has not tested that ever. So so far so good, at least.
Yeah. Okay. So Russia's playground in the Baltic Sea will be closed. I think we would all hope for that, and that would probably benefit the whole security situation in Europe. I think.
Yes.
So, with that, our session comes to an end. Unfortunately, we already spoke for half an hour now. Thanks a lot, Sini. That was really great. Thank you also all the participants for tuning in. I think we covered quite a lot of ground there, but I think there's still a lot more to discuss. So hopefully we can still continue that discussion in a later session with you. But thanks very much for this. That was very helpful. The next edition of this series will deal with Central and Eastern Europe, and will take place next week on Thursday, the 23rd of February, at the same time. And you can register in the same way that you registered for this edition. So thank you very much again, and hopefully see you soon at another talk.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye-bye.